Hi everyone and welcome back to the garden. Hasn't it been amazing to have some sun this week, some September sun at last? We've been waiting for that summer for absolutely months on end and it's finally come. We've had some real heat this week, some beautiful sunshine, and here in the garden, I think September has got this potential to be my favourite month of the year. Obviously, growing a tropical garden, we all know what's around the corner. We know that colder, darker times are coming, but equally, September, it's a time when every plant's at its biggest and its best. The garden is absolutely full of flowers, scent as well, the brugmansia, the gingers. Even on a cloudy morning like today, the scent is absolutely incredible. So it's got the potential to be their favourite time of year out in the garden, and also that time coincides with the light dropping down in the sky. You get that low autumn light just coming through, not this morning because it's really cloudy, but the combination of the plants being at the best, that light, and as you can probably hear, all the birds starting to sing a bit later now rather than waking me up at 4 in the morning. To me, it makes it a very special time of year. And today, I wanted to have a quick look back. I did, early in the year, a couple of videos looking at budget tropical gardening, how you can create your own tropical paradise without spending a huge amount. And definitely, those principles still stand. It was one of the early videos that I did, and it was more designed at someone putting a whole garden together without spending a huge amount. But for a lot of people, like myself, it was more a case of finding plants to dot in between your other, more established specimen plants. Plants that you can use as filler plants to really add some extra summer colour. So today I want to have a quick look at the plants that I've tried this year, the ones that I didn't spend a lot of money on, and which ones have really stood out for me that I would definitely recommend for your garden next year. So what I tried to do is narrow it down to 3 different plants that for me deliver so much for how I spent on them. And it was tricky to narrow it down. There's so many plants in the garden this year. I've really tried to be experimental, buy all kinds of different plants and grow a lot from seed. Some of the experiments have worked, some like the cannas, they've done alright, but they also look like they've been eaten by quite a lot of insects. The other brugmansias, they were $1.99 Lidl specials. Obviously they've still grown well, they're flowered, but potentially they've not grown as well as they could have done. And that might be down to the cooler summer, it might be down to where I've got them here in the garden in quite a shady spot, so I can't entirely blame it on them. But these 3 plants are plants that have grown really well despite the conditions, and for me, they're absolutely plants that you should try next year. I'm going to organise the plants in terms of how much I spent on them, working my way up to my ultimate budget tropical garden plant. But firstly, kicking things off, we've got the banana, the Musa basjoo behind me. And that's a plant that I mentioned in my budget tropical garden video as more of an investment plant. Something you can spend £10 on now, and in a few years it'll be an absolutely incredible giant banana plant. But it's also an impressive plant at the end of its first year. Admittedly, this year it's been quite a cool summer. A lot of these plants haven't grown quite as well as they could have done, and that banana is actually in a pot. So despite those 2 factors, it's still grown into a really impressive plant. And that's from something that cost £10 that was maybe a foot tall a couple of months ago, maybe a few months ago, definitely early summer. So in that time, it's grown from a small plant you wouldn't think anything of, up to something that will definitely be a star of your container garden. So for me, that's a plant that is absolutely worth the investment, and it's a plant that definitely adds that tropical vibe. Banana plants have leaves that look like nothing else. For me, they're an absolute staple of a tropical garden, and if you can get a ticket to that show for £10, it's absolutely worth it. In my budget tropical garden video, I talk more about how banana is part of the puzzle of creating a tropical garden. It's a plant that's got the potential to deliver absolutely massive impact in just 2 or 3 years. They can really go from being a small plant up to a massive specimen in just a few seasons and really create that wow effect in your garden. But also, I know a lot of you got smaller gardens, or maybe you're restricted to growing in pots. So for the price of a bunch of flowers, I'm cheap, for the price of a bunch of flowers, you can have a banana plant that will grow relatively big in a pot. You can get a lot of leaves for not very much money and a very small pot size. So in terms of how much you're going to spend on it versus the impact, I think they're a fantastic choice. And like I said, for tropical lush foliage, a banana plant is really hard to beat. Sure, you can get tree ferns, but with those, you'd be talking £50, £100 or something that size. Whereas with the banana, although it's only going to grow half a year, for that half a year, you potentially get a new leaf every single week. And for me, they're an absolute essential part of your garden. A plant that's narrowly missed out in a place in this video is the other banana looking plant that grow here. It's Ensete ventricosum Maurelii, which is like the Musa basjoo, but it's got these amazing purple, red, orangey leaves that just seem to change colour when the light hits them. It's a plant that if you can overwinter it its first year, carry it on to the second year, you can get a plant like this, which has got so much impact, it's got so much tropical appeal for less than £10 again, which is just incredible value. The only reason I've not featured it in this video is this year they haven't grown quite as well for me as the Musa basjoo, and I bought a load of small plug plants again. I bought a load of plants from Grow Paradise, and I can't recommend the service and the quality plants there enough. Craig, he delivered some amazing plants, I got a load of them, but this year they've just not grown as well for me. So maybe it's a lack of summer heat, maybe it's a lack of direct sun, which is partly down to the weather and partly down to the actual garden here. They just haven't grown quite as well as the Musa basjoo. So I think as well, it's a plant you need to give more care to in terms of overwintering. Whereas the Musa basjoo, as soon as they're past that first tricky winter, they should be pretty much bulletproof hardy in most places in the UK. So the Ensete is a nice alternative to the Musa basjoo, and it's definitely another plant that complements it really well. But for me, the Musa basjoo, for a plant you can get for £5, maybe £10, you can get so much impact, and it definitely belongs in every tropical garden. If you're watching this video in spring 2022 or beyond and you're wanting to add one of these amazing foliage plants to your exotic garden, then I put together a care video earlier this year looking at how to grow them best, how to get the biggest leaves, and the care differences between Musa basjoo and the Ensete. I'll put a link to that up there. Anyway, on to the next plant. I don't have to move very far to show you my second budget tropical garden superhero. It's Salvia Amistad, and if I look distracted it's because there's a kestrel just hovering over the garden next door, just about to swoop down. But this is a plant that I didn't feature originally in my budget tropical garden video, but I touched on it in my later video looking at how you can use plug plants as great filler plants. And it's a plant I didn't actually grow at the old garden. And in a small garden, I thought that you really have to prioritise both tropical foliage and flowers to get the most impact for your money. In the case of cannas, gingers, they deliver both of those. But the reality is, a plant like Salvia, it's flowering for so much longer. You're not waiting until late August, early September for it to really start flowering. This has flowered for months on end. And all this plant here, this is just from one small plug plant bought early in the year. And because they're plug plants, you can afford to buy more of them, so you can spend £10–12, get 5 or 6 like I did, spread them throughout your garden. You get the same colour scheme going, and it's fantastic for the bees as well. So for me, in terms of impact, for such a small sum, this plant has absolutely delivered, and it's a plant that I'll be growing throughout the garden in years to come. Cannas and gingers, they definitely deserve a place here in the garden, but for me, salvias, they tick another box that I didn't even know I had, and that really, it's just an easy plant that fits in with the vibe, but doesn't take a lot of care. So not only are they cheap to actually buy initially, the plug plants, like I said, they're only £2 each, and those they grew quickly. So unlike some of the gingers that you can buy cheaply, you can buy small bits of dried up ginger rhizome for maybe a £5, and they do produce big plants, but they also need a lot of heat to get there, and you might find that you need to rely on specialist propagators and things like that to actually get them going. Whereas these salvias, you could buy a pack of these plugs in maybe April time, plant them up into small 4-inch, 9cm pots, and you can grow them on your kitchen windowsill for another month or so, wait until those last frosts have been, and then you can plant it out into the garden. And this is a plant that's grown strongly, without any additional heat, without any special care, it's just done its thing. All I've done, nice rich soil and given it plenty of water. So for me, it's more that economy when you look at it on a larger level. They're not expensive to buy, you don't need any special equipment to grow them, and they deliver so much value for the money. And when it comes to winter, some of your gingers, some of your cannas, yes, I know some of you will actually overwinter them outside, you won't need to dig them up, but in colder areas, in wetter areas like here, I don't leave a lot of mine in the ground because I found that it can just get too wet for them. Whereas salvia, just going off the experience of other people in the comments, things I've read about it, it's a plant that whilst it's not entirely hardy, for most gardens in most winters, it should be absolutely fine to leave it outside. So it's not a plant you need to worry about setting up a greenhouse or a polytunnel for. At this price anyway, it's not a massive risk, but you can leave it outside and next summer it'll be even bigger and even better. So definitely recommended. Anyway, let's go on to the third. Speaking of gingers, the fragrance coming from that new bloom there is absolutely incredible, and they're definitely a plant I'd recommend to add that extra dimension to your late summer, early autumn garden. The fragrance, it really takes you to somewhere else. But anyway, it's time to move on to our third and final budget tropical garden superhero. And I'd love to tell you about some new fast-growing palm, some tree ferns you can buy at 90% off at a certain department store, but unfortunately I haven't had any of those kind of bargains this year. If you've managed to find some, then let me know in the comments below. But my third and final plant, it has to be a plant that delivers so much without spending a lot at all. And for that, it has to be a plant you can grow from seed. So that got me thinking, which seeds are there that you can grow without a lot of effort, without needing fancy equipment, that germinate quickly, that grow quickly, that add so many leaves and flowers to your tropical garden? So my third and final choice, it's nothing fancy. And the reality is, it's probably the easiest plant you can grow. Children can grow it from seed, anyone can grow it, and for me, it really adds to my tropical garden. It's nasturtiums. So let me explain that last choice before you all turn off in your droves. Nasturtiums, they're an essential part of an exotic garden. There we are, I said it. They're not some fancy new exotic plant that everyone needs to have. They're not something that you're going to look at by itself and think, wow, what is that? Everyone knows what nasturtiums are. They grow in all kinds of different gardens. They look absolutely great with cottage style planting. You can grow them in hanging baskets. There's so many different kinds, smaller sorts, big trailing varieties. They're a plant that's definitely versatile, but a bit old-fashioned maybe. A lot of people know what they are, and for that reason you might not think that they have a place in a tropical garden, where really the goal of so many plants here is just to make you think, wow, and what is that? Plants like the tetrapanax, the ensetes, those, they just scream for attention. Whereas nasturtiums, it's definitely a lot more familiar. But they're definitely familiar for good reasons. They're just great doers. And here in the garden, how I use them, well, when it comes to maybe early May to early June this year, when I'm planting out those tender exotics, there's a lot of bare spaces of soil, especially at the front of borders, and you run the risk there. Do you buy a load of other little filler plants to put them in, knowing that they might be crowded out later in the year? Or do you buy some seeds that you can plant in those spots, knowing that you can rip them out if you need to without any kind of guilt? Well, not a lot of guilt anyway. Knowing that those plants can then trail around and just do their thing. You can soften the edge of your garden with them. So for me, I use them in those bare spots of soil and I direct sow them straight into the earth. So there's no fancy propagator needed. You don't even need to grow them on your kitchen windowsill. I just push a few seeds into each hole and just drop them around the garden. And they're fantastic for going in the middle to maybe the front of borders, where they can just weave around, do their thing. And I think the reality is nasturtiums, whilst they are familiar, if you look at those leaves, they're definitely tropical. They're like a smaller colocasia leaf when you see all those heart-shaped leaves packed together. And the flowers, they definitely fit the theme too. They're like little jewels of yellow and orange. For me, as a plant, if it had a more exotic sounding name, if it was harder to look after, if it was maybe evergreen, it would be everyone's must-have tropical plant. But the reality is, it's a plant that you can buy for 2p a seed. You get a pack of 60 seeds for maybe £2 something. They don't cost a lot at all, and it's definitely worth giving them a go. Like I said, they're so easy to grow, and for me, they're a great companion plant that doesn't grow too tall, but ties in with that exotic aesthetic, and also feeds into that idea that I've got in most of the garden here, that to create a true jungle paradise, you have to blur the boundaries and have plants that spill over the edges to really soften it. So just to show you what I mean, here in this section of the garden, I've got a tree fern from the other side of the world there, that's Salvia medullaris, all kinds of exotics mixed in, but it's the nasturtiums growing here that really tie it together. And you get so many leaves and so many flowers for a seed that costs you 2p. And just as that robin started singing, the loudest robin in the world, you can see them down here. The nasturtiums form an absolute carpet of leaves. And for me, they're one of those plants that they're a great filler plant, especially if you're new to tropical gardening. The battle is to find those plants that don't cost a lot of money, that you can use to really fill your borders, to cover that bare earth, and really create that lush, packed tropical garden effect. Nasturtium, it's definitely one of those. And here, pure coincidence, you can see it combined with the Musa basjoo and the Salvia Amistad. So these plants, they're my trio of superheroes. The plants you don't need to spend a lot of money on. £10 for Musa basjoo, maybe even a £5. The Salvia Amistad you can buy as plugs for a couple of pounds, or maybe a larger plant for around a £5. And the nasturtiums, £2 something for a pack of seeds. So really, for the amount you spend in it, for less than £20, you could pair those three plants together and have a tropical garden display that goes on and on and on. And the nasturtiums, they're not something you need to worry about when it comes to winter care either, because they're just an annual. You let winter do its thing, or you can break them up at the end of autumn, put them in the compost heap, put them in your brown bin or whatever, and then next year you start again from seed. So for me, these are three pieces of a puzzle that I definitely recommend. You don't have to spend a lot of money on them, they're very easy to grow, and even in a cool summer like this one, they still bring that lush tropical effect. But if you want something a little bit different, you can also get variegated nasturtiums as well. And here in this messy part of the garden, they're mixing perfectly with the cannas, the big tetrapanax. For me, they're another exotic looking plant that you can grow so easily. Here they just spill over the edges, they climb up the cannas, I pretty much leave them to do the thing. So whilst at this time of year plants are starting to get tatty, it's just the volume of leaves you first see when you look at the garden. And it's these nasturtiums that really create and add to that tropical effect. In terms of care tips then, as I said, nasturtiums, they're very easy to germinate and they're also very easy to grow. I literally just push them into the soil around 2 or 3 centimetres deep, probably around early May time, and leave them to do the thing. You can water them if it does get really dry. But in terms of soil amendments, nasturtiums, they actually flower more profusely in poorer soil. Whereas here, in the jungle garden, where I try to enrich the soil with different manures and fertilisers, you can actually get more leaves out of them than flowers, which some people might see as a downside, but to me, I don't really care whether it's leaves or flowers. If it makes them grow stronger, if it makes them have more of a presence in the garden and fill up more bare earth, then that's definitely a plus in my book. So they're a fantastic plant, and to me, they deserve that crown as this year's top budget tropical garden plant. If you've got some different ideas, if there's anything you've grown this year that didn't cost you a lot of money, that's produced absolutely amazing results, then let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, subscribe if you want, and I'll see you in the next video.